Okay, so now that we've finished our road design in CT214 in our highway class, now we're going to get started with doing our design um, for our drainage for our waters class for CT235 for drainage and pipe networks. So this is the first video, kind of get you started off with this project, and then I'll keep going through all the way to the end, so we have a full tutorial video from beginning to end with drainage and pipe networks. So first thing you want to do is you want to make sure to create a new folder. Like in your Civil 3D drawings, you have a CT235 folder for this class. And in there, you want to make sure that you have basically a copy of your roads design and basically a subdivision drawing that is right off the bat, the start right from land use and planning class. So no roads on it, just your surface and all your lots and blocks and things like that. Uh, but no roads, no finished ground surfaces, no anything like that. So once you have that created, and they have to be in the same folder. Once you have that created, I've got both of them open here. So here's what my subdivision one looks like. It's basically just my subdivision, nothing else, not the roads. And then I have my other one that's just the roads. We need to have that road surface finished as well in there so that we can tie out our lots to that. So if you take a look at what I've got, another thing that I did um, after basically the highway class to kind of finish this out is I actually went through and changed my assemblies so that all of the assemblies um, basically they had this link width and slope. So instead of grading down to link slope and surface like we had before, uh, I've just replaced those with this link width and slope. Okay, and if I look at the properties of that, we just did a 10-foot wide link width and slope at a positive 2%. So basically, from the edge of the road, from the edge of the curb and gutter, out 10 feet on both sides is what we have our side slopes. All right, so once you've done that, now we need to create a data shortcut so that we can export this surface into our subdivision drawing, which we're going to do all of our grading. But we're still going to have that link so that if we change the roads, it's going to dynamically link inside our subdivision. So what we're going to use is something called data shortcuts. So the way we do that is we go over here in our tool space, in our prospector tab, under our subdivision roads, so our roads drawing. If you go down here, there's this option called data shortcuts down here. The reason we're doing data shortcuts is because if we try to do grading and pipe networks all together inside a drawing with corridors and everything, Civil 3D might not like it and might bog down on us and crash. So we're going to do just some links. So first of all, we just right click on the data shortcuts heading there, and we're going to set the working folder. Now this working folder that you're going to set is the folder that these drawings are in, both of the drawings. So mine was under One Civil 3D Drawings, and I created the CT235 folder, and everything's in there. So I'm going to make that CT235 my working folder. So you hit OK. Now I've got the working folder set. Now I need to right click again on data shortcuts, and I need to create a shortcuts project folder. So we click on new data shortcuts project folder, and this is going to go into this working folder that we set, and we are going to name it something. So I'm going to name mine subdivision, subdivision shortcuts. and then I'm going to hit OK. Now we can see there's an extension, a file path right here now after that data shortcut. So that's where everything is going to be stored for our data shortcuts. So now next thing we need to do is I need to create shortcuts for the road surface as well as my alignments along my center line. So I right click again on data shortcuts and I'm going to do create data shortcuts. Now it says if you get this error where it says to create data shortcuts, the current data shortcuts project folder must be the same as the project associated to the current drawing. If it says that, just close out there, go back here, right click on your data shortcuts, and associate the project to the current drawing. And then it's going to say the working folder, make sure it's the working folder that we're dealing with. Make sure the project is set to subdivision shortcuts or whatever folder you created for your data shortcut folder. I'm going to hit OK, and that should fix that issue. Now if I right click, I can click create data shortcuts, and this is what should pop up. So if yours popped up right away before as this, that's great. Otherwise, that's the workaround to get around that. So first thing I'm going to do is I am going to make sure I choose my road surface. So it's the road surface for this whole road corridor network. So I pick that, as well as only my center line alignments. I only want the alignments that go along the center line. I don't want any of the offsets or curb return alignments or anything like that. So now I'm going to hit OK. And now we've created shortcuts from this drawing that we can use in the other drawings. So now I make sure to save this roads drawing, and I can go back to subdivision. So now I'm in my regular subdivision drawing. So it's just my subdivision. It has no roads or anything in there yet. And I want to make sure that my data shortcuts down here is set to the right destination. So if I hover over it, I can see right now it's going to CT235 subdivision shortcuts. So we're all good with that. You see down here now, I have a plus button next to my surfaces that I can expand, and I see my road FG there, as well as the alignments that I have for my center line. So to start off with, all I'm going to do is basically make a data reference in this drawing for the road. So I expand surfaces over here under the data shortcuts. I find my road surface that I have there. I right click and I hit create reference. Then it's going to open up a create surface reference dialog box. I'm just going to leave the name as is. I could change it if I needed to. Since we're dealing with a pretty flat area, I'm going to change my style to contours 1 and 5 design, not background. And I'm going to hit OK and OK. And it should process through and we should get our road surface that shows up. If for some reason it doesn't show up, go and check your layers and make sure that the layers are on and everything like that. So now I've got my reference for my surface. The alignments we'll bring in later when we do pipe networks. So one thing that you're going to want to do now is go back to our subdivision roads, because we need to create basically our extents of our roads, so our curb and gutter offsets and things like that. So I'm going to go back to my subdivision for my roads drawing. Now if I were to make any changes to the corridor in here, it would automatically be able to be updated in my other subdivision drawing. So what I want to do is I've already created my offsets. So if I go over and hover over my edge of my lane, if I click, I have a polyline there. And this polyline is for basically the edge of bit all the way around. So I'm going to select that. I'm going to right click and I'm going to I'm actually going to isolate that layer. So I'm going to type LAYISO, and that's what I get. So it's basically the line work for all my curb and gutter, as well as the 10-foot offset on the inside so that I can make basically a tie-in point for my lots. So once you've got your curb and gutter lines in there, you don't need to worry so much about this 10-foot offset yet if you don't have it. We can bring that in later. So I'm going to select all of that, type Control Shift C to copy it, specify a base point. So I'm going to type 0, 0, 0. Now I basically copied it based off of the 0 origin. I'm going to go back to my subdivision and type Control V, 0, 0, 0, enter, and it pastes in. So there I have my line work for my curb and gutter. So it looks a little better. I can actually see the defined extents of my road. Okay, so now I have my road surface in here as well as my road lines. Now it's time to start looking at my lots and how I'm going to be grading those. So typically, in order to make water flow on a lot, we want to make sure we maintain a minimum, or we have a minimum slope of 1%, so no less than 1%, and no greater than 4 to 1. And 4 to 1 is 25%. We don't want steeper slopes than 4 to 1, because if you try to do a riding lawnmower on a slope that's steeper than 4 to 1, you could risk tipping over. So typically lots maximum 4 to 1, minimum 1%, so that we can make sure that the water is going to flow. So the way we do this next part is we actually will go in and we'll take a look at what the elevation is for the back of curb in front of each lot. So basically, if we go to the middle of the lot, go straight out, find out what the elevation is. So we can set these elevations for our building pads to the right elevation. So the way we can do that is we can actually go in and go to our Analyze tab. And in our Analyze tab, if we go over to the Inquiry tool, now we can select the type of inquiry as surface and surface elevation and grade at point. And we're basing it off the road FG, my finished ground road surface. And now it says to specify a point. So I'm going to start basically off here, this middle one here on the west side. I'm going to go basically midpoint of the lot, go straight in here, turn my snap on, snap to the nearest to the back of curb. So that line there. And I see that I have an elevation of 1045.526. Now I've got this 50-foot setback from the edge of the lot, and it's probably another 20 feet, so it's about 70 feet. So if you were to do a calculation of what it would take to maintain at least a minimum of 1%, so something greater than 1% at 70 feet, we could calculate it, figure out how much we have to climb um, to make sure that we reach that point here at the building pad. What I'm going to do is, to be a safe amount, is I'm just going to add 3 feet to it. Okay, so basically I'm going to take this 1045, I'm going to add 3 feet, which will give me the 1045 or 1048.5. Now from here, I'd probably want to round to the nearest foot, so I'm going to take it actually to 1049, just to be safe, because I can change these elevations later. So I'm going to close out of my inquiry tool, and I'm just going to remember that 1049. Okay, so what I'm going to do is have to start creating feature lines for this building pad. So I'm going to go up to my Home tab and go to Feature Line, and I am going to create a feature line from Objects. So I'm going to pick that, and I'm going to pick this first building pad and right click. Okay, so now you're going to get this Create Feature Lines dialog box, and first thing at the top it asks you to select the site. And if you hit that, you see I probably have Site 1 and None. Site 1, it's very important to make sure you're putting things to the right site, because feature lines within a site interact with each other. If you're using feature lines from a different site, they're not going to interact with each other. And right now, all your parcels are set up under Site 1. Parcel lines are feature lines. So if we were to create these feature lines in Site 1, it would start conflicting with um, the parcel lines, and we would start getting a little bit of a mess going on. So it's probably it's a good idea to just change that or create a new site for our grading to be separate from what our parcels are. So over here we got this little button here to create a new, basically a new site. So if I click on that, I'm going to create a new site. I'm going to call this site lot grading and hit OK. So now this feature line and all feature lines that I'll create from here out for the lot grading purposes are going to go to this site. It's a good idea to get in the habit of naming things. So for instance, I'd check the name and I'd name it whatever my lot was, block number, and note that it's a building pad. For me, I've got a little bit of an issue here with my lots. They're all one because of my parcels have kind of broken down. So I'm just going to leave it as is, and there's going to be feature 1, feature 2, so on. But in an industry, it's probably a good idea to make sure you're organizing things, putting it in the right naming, putting it in the right sites, just so that you have things neat and organized. So when you get down the road and you have a huge drawing, everything seems to work okay, and you get good results, okay, and you don't get things lost. And then when you get down here to the conversion options, there's no need to keep this uh, this polyline here for the building pad. So I'm going to erase the existing entities, and then I'm going to check assign elevations so that I assign an elevation to it. I'm going to hit OK, and we get the assign elevations box. Now I'm not going to assign a surface elevation. I'm going to assign my own manual input elevation. So I check elevation here, and it's what I calculated before, which was the 1049. So I'm going to type 1049 is what I figured my building pad should be at. I hit OK. Now you'll notice mine disappears. Try a regen all just to see if it comes back. The reason it disappeared is because that wants to go to a C topo. I'll just turn or check my frozen layers. It wants to go to this C topo feet layer, which I have frozen. So if I turn that C topo feet layer back on, now it pops back up. So when you're creating feature lines, they go to the C topo feet layer. So if it disappears for some reason, that's why. Now, since this is such a flat site and there's not much variation in heights in these roads, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to, since this was a high point right at this point, and that's what I based this elevation off of, if I set all of these building pads to 1049, I should be safe, and I can adjust them later. It's just a good quick starting point. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to go up to feature line, create feature line from objects. Now this time I'm just going to go through and select all of these building pads, because I'm just going to set them all to the same elevation. Now I'm just manually clicking them like this. It may be more beneficial to isolate that layer, or that and the C topo feet layer, and then you can just kind of window select them all. But I'll just pick them all just so you can see that I'm picking every single one. So I'm picking all these lot pads, or building pads I should say, and going around picking all of them. Now I've got all the building pads selected. I'm going to right click, make sure it's going to the lot grading site. Go here. The one thing with this one is selecting all of them is you can't individually select what each name is, so that could be an issue. So then you'd have to pick each one individually or go through and change the names as you go through later. But I'm going to assign elevations and I'm going to erase all the existing entities. Hit OK. And now I'm going to assign the elevation of 1049. Hit OK. And now I've got all my building pads at 1049. So now that we've got the building pads, now we can get started on basically grading out the lots and what do we need to do in that situation. So one thing you're going to want to do, and here's where you're going to want to make sure to have these 10-foot offsets. So if you have the 10-foot offset in here, one thing that might be beneficial, like for this one out here that I don't have a 10-foot, I might want to bump that in a little bit just so that I make sure that I'm catching surface all the way around. So since this was 10 feet here, I'm going to actually offset that one back in 0.5 feet. And then I'm going to erase that 10-foot offset. So now basically I have a 9.5 foot offset. So I'm going to offset this side as well 9.5 feet. So offset 9.5. And this is just so that we can make sure that when we create a feature line for that, we have surface to attach to. So I'm going all the way around, making sure I got my 9.5. So here's my 9.5. 9.5. This inside here would have actually, these would have been 10 feet. So I'm going to take that back out another half a foot. So take this, offset half a foot in, erase that polyline on the outside. This was a 10 foot, so I'm going to offset that one back in half a foot and erase that 10 foot. So now everything I have is basically a 9.5 foot offset. And you'll see why I did that if you end up trying to create a feature line and end up getting 0 elevations. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create these offsets here as feature lines too, so I can grade out to those. So go back up to feature lines, create feature lines from objects, and I am going to pick all of these 9.5 foot offsets that I had just done. There, I think I got every single one. Accept it, make sure it's going to the same site, lot grading. And since I can name these ones, I'm going to call them, instead of feature next counter, I am going to call them road offsets next counter. So it'll be road offset or road offset next counter. So it's going to be road offset 1, road offset 2, and so on. I'm going to erase the existing entities and I'm going to assign elevations to it. Hit OK. Now instead of assigning an elevation like we did before, I'm actually going to have it assign elevations from a surface. So basically everywhere this line goes around, whatever the surface elevation is underneath it, that's the elevation that's going to give it. So I want to do from surface, but I want to make sure I'm using my finished ground road surface as my basically what it's pulling the elevations from. Now you see this check insert intermediate grade breakpoints. I want to make sure that that's checked. If I don't have that checked, it's only going to put elevations to wherever I have a PI or a vertex, sorry. So basically on these big curves, there'd only be one elevation point there, one elevation point there, and it would just straight grade it all the way through. By inserting intermediate grade breakpoints, every time basically a tin line crosses that that feature line that's going to be created, it inserts a point. So it makes a lot nicer, basically feature line to tie out to. So make sure that's checked. Hit OK, and now it might take a little while because it's got a lot of feature line to go through. So it's going to chug a little bit, and eventually it ends up that we have feature lines there now that we can tie out to. Now, one thing you're going to want to check before you really go any further is click on each one, look at the properties, make sure that there is no zero elevations to any of them. So I'm going to pick that one, and now you see how there's all these little points. That's because of those intermediate grade breakpoints. So I click on that. I can either go to the elevation editor and look at all the elevations. So if I go to elevation editor, I can see my list of elevations. So I could just scroll through all these, make sure that there's no zeros. Okay, so like there is none with that. Or you could just go to properties, and once it opens here, there's a lot of information for that feature line to go through. But if you just go to properties, you should get a minimum elevation and a maximum elevation. If the minimum says 0, you've got an issue. But that one's okay. I'll check this one now. So properties. And I see I have no 0 there, so that's good. Check my other one. So I have one in here. Look at my properties. No 0, so I'm good. Check this little inner one. No 0, so I'm good there too. So all of my feature lines are good. Now, if you did have a 0, you're going to want to back up a few steps, and you're going to want to make sure to maybe offset that one in a little more. If you have to have it less than 9 feet in between the back of curb and this outer edge, and if it's going less than that and it's still not picking up any elevation, then you'll have to basically reevaluate your surface and make sure that it's actually going out 10 feet on each side to tie out to. Okay, so now the next step, now that we have our building pads at elevation, we have the basically where the offsets from the streets have elevation for grading. Now we have to create basically what I would do is create the breaks from the sides of these building pads, because for instance on this particular one I would want this to grade out, or basically everything that the water when it rains that will go about from here is going to flow out this way. Everything from here is going to flow out to the back of the lot. That way we maintain that we have a dry area for our house to be. So I'll start with this one since that's what I started with first. So the way we do that is you go up to feature line. Instead of creating a feature line from objects, we're going to just create a feature line. And make sure again it's going to the log grading site. Now when you're doing the naming, if you've got good lot and block numbers, I would probably try to name it something unique for each one that you're creating. But again, I don't have it, so I'm just going to leave it as just feature next counter. Next thing I'm going to do is hit OK, and now it's asking me where do I want to have my start point. So I'm going to start with this lot. So probably somewhere in the middle here would be fine. So I'm going to do control right click and choose the midpoint. So that midpoint there. Now it automatically picks up the elevation from this feature line since they're on the same grading site or on the same site. So it says 1049, which is what I want, so I hit enter. Now it says to specify the next point. So one thing I could do is I could go straight out here, but if I'm looking ahead, when I'm grading from this one, I'm probably coming back a little ways. So I'm going to probably move this um, over here a little bit and place it. Actually, I'm going to back up and actually erase this feature line. I don't want to. I'm noticing something that I want to change here. So I'm going to go back up to feature line, create feature line, and I'm going to go make sure I'm lot grading, hit OK. Seeing that these building pads are staggered quite a bit, I'm going to actually place this break where it grades halfway a little further back. So I'm going to control right click and do a nearest and pick a point further back. Again, it picks up the elevation, so 1049, and I'm going to go straight out perpendicular to the edge there. Now it says to specify the grade, or you can specify the slope, elevation, difference, a surface you want to tie into a transition. I'm going to go at a grade, and since I want to have a minimum of 1%, I'm just going to type minimum or minus 1% and hit enter. That's where I'm going to end. So I'm just going to right click and accept it. So now if I take a look at this, so click that feature line and look at my elevation editor, I'm starting at 1049, I'm going ahead at a 1% or minus 1% down to a 1048.78. So I'll accept that. Okay, next side here is I want to grade this out. So I'm going to do something similar to this one. I'm going to go to feature line, create feature line. Again, make sure it's going to the lot grading site. Make sure you have a name if you can. Hit OK. Control right click. I'm going to go to nearest. Choose this side. It picks up the elevation of that line since they're on the same site. Control right click and perpendicular into that lot line. I want to use grade at a -1 and just right click to enter to exit it. So now I have basically where all the water is going to flow this way, or it's flowing away from the house building pad, and eventually now we're going to create a ditch in between the lots as well. So now the next step to do is I'm going to basically do some creation of a feature line along the edge of these lots so that I can finish or somewhat finish that out. So now what I'm going to do is instead of creating a feature line right away, I'm just going to create a polyline. And you're going to see why I'm going to do that in a second. So I'm going to start here at the back of the lot, that lot corner. And since this is a straight lot line, I'm just going to go straight through and snap to the end point. And I'm going to do the same thing, polyline, just like that. Now, if it wasn't a straight line, you'd want to make sure to snap vertexes along every single vertex of that parcel line, that lot line. Now I want this, basically everything that's going to be flowing in this ditch to tie in to this feature line out here. So now I can do basically an extend, EX, enter. I'm going to pick this feature line as what I want to extend to, then right click, and then go back and pick the polyline and extend the polyline out to that feature line. Now that I've done that, now what I want to do is create both of these as feature lines. So I'm going to go back up to feature line from objects, and pick both polylines. Don't pick the parcel segments. again, you're going to the lot grading site. Now, if you were to do the naming method, you'd create this one first, and you'd say, you know, lot line of, or lot 1 and lot 2 of block 1 lot line, or something like that to identify it. But again, I'm just gonna go from here. So next thing it says, do you want to erase existing entities? Yes, I'm going to erase it. Do I want to assign elevations? This time, no. So I'm going to hit OK. It's just going to create a feature line, and I'm going to basically give it elevation now. So now I'm going to start with this first one. I'm going to select that feature line. I'm going to take a look at my elevation editor. When I look at my elevation editor, you see it's got this point here that's already got elevation to it. It's because it passed or by this feature line, and it notices that there's already an elevation to the end of that feature line, which is 1048.782, so it automatically gives that. So that's why it does what it does. Next thing I want to do is I want to take a look at this point here. So if I select like this endpoint, you can see that there's a triangle on this drawing. That indicates to me that that's this point. Now, I can also tell that that's that point because I started my polyline from the back and ended it here. I want to assign an elevation to this point, and that elevation is going to be at the surface of my road. So if I select this this point here, go up here to elevations from surface, select my road FG, hit OK. It's going to give this point here, the elevation of my road at that point of my corridor. Now if I take a look, okay, so from this point I'm at a 1045.28. I can see that I'm going back at a 2.56, back to the 1048.782. So I know that I'm at the I've exceeded the minimum of 1%, so I'm all good. So there's no need to do any adjustments there. So I'm grading from here down at a 2.56% to the street here. Now I want to grade this point to the back of the lot. So what I'm going to do is right here we have grade back. So it's grade back from this point. I'm going to grade back at a minus 1%. Okay, so something happened there. It shouldn't have happened. This shouldn't have adjusted. Okay, missed a step here. The reason why is because that's a one solid line. This point here is not a real point. It's just picking up that elevation. So what I would do is go up here to this insert elevation point, and it's going to go ask me where do I want to place it. I'm going to place it right there, and I am going to just assign it that elevation. So now if I grade back at a minus 1%, that should stay the same. Okay, good. So there's a fix to that I'll do in the next lot that I should have done to start off with, but that's why it wasn't grading. As long as this one that's at the street remains the same, we're good. We don't want to adjust that. That stays at what the elevation is at the for this road finish ground. But so I'm going to accept that. you're going to notice that this changed now. So if I look at my elevation editor, that elevation changed because of that point, but we're still at a -1, so we're still good. I mean, we're still greater than a -1. So now to do this one here, I'm going to select that feature line, and I'll do elevation editor. Again, there's not a point here, so I'm going to do a insert elevation point. Click there, snap at that endpoint, accept what it gives me. So now that's an elevation point. Now this endpoint, which is at the road, I want to assign that an elevation of the surface for the road surface at that point. So I'm going to go elevation from surface, pick my road surface, hit OK, and now that should change to whatever the surface is at that point. So I can see now it's at 1045, this is 1048, so I'm dropping down towards the street at a 2.45%. It's good because it's less than 1%, or it's greater than 1%. But I want to make sure now that this grades out to the back of the lot. So grade back at a -1%. So now we've gone to the back of the lot at 1046.904. So my high point is right there, which is good. That's what I want. All right, so I'll accept that. Now this lot's pretty much done except for the back of the lot, but we will do that at the end of this after doing all the ones along this section. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to move to another lot. So I'm going to move to this lot here. Again, using feature line, create feature line, making sure to go into the lot grading. Okay, I'm going to go OK. And this one I'm going to start at right about there. It picks up the elevation of that line at 1049. That's okay. Go down to here. Now you see the specify grade here it's not 0. It has an actual elevation or an actual slope in there, but it's because it's snapping to this elevation that's already down here. But you'll notice it's not. It's actually less than 1%. So I'm going to change that to -1%. Enter and then enter again or right click to escape out. What that's going to do is that actually just dropped this one down. So it's a good idea to click on this one, check the elevation editor, make sure we're still at a 1%, or at least, so we're good. Also make sure to check this line here because it did adjust that elevation too. And everything is still at good slopes, so no need to change anything there. So that line is good. Now we're going to do the line up here. So again, I'm going to look to the lot to the north. I see that it's a little staggered again, so I'm probably going to do mine a little bit back here. So again, feature line, create feature line. Okay, make sure it's going to the lot grading. I'm going to start it back right at this point. It picks up the elevation that's already at the building pad, 1049, so I accepted it by hitting enter. Control right click, do nearest, and I'm going to go back out to about here. And I want to go at a -1%. And then right click to accept that. So now I've got that one. Now I need to build this lot line here. So I'm going to create a polyline again. I'm going to snap from the back of the lot. This time, to avoid that issue that we had here, I'm going to create a vertex at that point, and then again at that point, and accept it. So now I've got a polyline that's got a vertex there, so we should already have an elevation point there when we create a feature line. So now I need to extend that out to this feature line. So I'm going to do an extend, an EX, pick that feature line, right click, select that polyline, right click. So we've extended it to that spot. Now we create a feature line from that line. So create feature line from objects, and I pick that polyline, and it's going to the lot grading site. I'm going to erase existing entities, and I'm not going to assign elevations. Hit OK. Now I take a look at select my feature line and take a look at my elevation editor. So this midpoint has been given an elevation right there. This point here, make sure that it's the right one, which is this point, needs to be set to the surface out here. So you select that, elevations from surface, and choose your road FG. And OK, and there it goes. So now I can see that from this point I'm at a 1044, this point's a 1048, so this is my high point, and I'm at a 2.8% slope between the two. So I'm over my 1% minimum, so I'm good. I'll accept it. But I need to go grade back down at a 1% for the back of the lot. So here for my grade back, minus 1%. Again, make sure that the midpoint's still your high point, which it is, and I accept that. So now I got those two lots. Next step would be to go and do the next lot up here. So again, feature line, create a feature line, going to the lot grading site, OK, and I want to line up pretty much with this one, so I'm going to start at about this point. It picks up the elevation already at 1049, accept it, go back down to that point. It says minus 6.66. It needs to be minus 1%, so I'll change it. Now I'm going to double check this one with the elevation editor, make sure I'm still at a minimum, because changing this changed this. So we want to make sure we check. Also check this feature line. Okay, so this is still good from the street, but we're no longer good from here to the back of the lot. So I'll just adjust that back again. So now I know I'm at that minus 1%. So I've done that one. Now it's time to do this one up here. So again, feature line, create a feature line, going to lot grading, okay, and line up so I have somewhat of a good balance between these two lots. So I'm going to actually start mine a little bit ahead, right about here. It picks up the elevation that's there, so enter. I'm going to go perpendicular into this lot line, add a minus 1%, right click to accept. Now I have that feature line there. Now I have to create the feature line for this lot line. So again, start with a polyline from the back of the lot to that point. To the end point there. Again, extend it out to that. So EX, pick that feature line, right click, pick that line. Now we're extending it out. Create a feature line from objects, pick that lot line, make sure it's going to lot grading, erase the existing entity, don't assign elevations to it. Okay, let's take a look at our feature line, elevation editor. Okay, the midpoint's got an elevation already. If I go to this end point, I see that that's that point. I need to assign that to the road surface. So elevation from surface, choose my road FG, okay. Now I've got that elevation. Next thing to do is need to make sure we grade from this point to the back of the lot. So grade back for this one at a minus 1. Still my high point is the midpoint. Accept it. Now that portion is good. Okay, so what you're going to want to do is just you'd keep going all the way along till you have this back of the lot section left. Then once it's time to close this back of the lot, all you've got to do is go to feature line and create a feature line. Make sure it's going to the lot grading and probably name it something like, since this is back of lots, I'm going to call it back lots next counter. Okay. And you just basically start snapping down. Since I'm not at that point yet, I'm going to start mine here. So if I snap to that endpoint, okay, it says to specify an elevation. Right now it's got it set to 0. Sometimes it'll pick up this elevation, sometimes it doesn't. Unfortunately, this one particular one doesn't, so I'm just going to say hit enter to accept the 0. I can adjust it. Now pick the next point, so I'm going to go here to that endpoint. Okay, I'm going to back out here, just undo because it's not. Here, what we'll do actually is try just back out, do a polyline. So basically start at one edge, work to the way to the next edge, to the next edge, next, 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 next. Just making sure to insert those points at every basically break in that line. Now that I have that, I should be able to go to feature line from objects, and then select that polyline. Make sure it's going to the lot grading, and I'm going to call this one again back lots. I'm going to erase the existing entities. I'm not going to assign any of the elevations. Hit OK. Now let's take a look. Okay, so I picked that feature line. Take a look at my elevation editor. Okay, it looks like it picked up an elevation at that point and an elevation at that point. Not quite sure why it didn't pick up elevations at those points. Oh, for some reason it went back to 0. But if I adjust that, making sure that I'm going back at a -1%, it should now have updated those. So now we got those elevations in here. And then the tweaking that'll come at the end, and we'll look at that later on in another video, but is you see that the back of the lots, they're floating around these percentages that might not work in certain cases. We might want to have it flow to some type of catch basin. But now we've actually got basically everything enclosed in here. So this is where I'm going to stop this one. It's a good start. You'd work on the rest of the lots, get them to connect. I'm going to basically come back at another video after I've done a bunch of lots already, and then just carry on from there.